Should we want to move on to indecency, or should we talk about whether anybody will have a job in 10 years? Let's talk. Let's get a little bit, because the indecency we can go on and on and on. Let me talk a little bit about what's happening at the FCC in terms of broadcasting, public broadcasting, and it's really become the Federal Broadband Commission, as you might have figured out in the past 2 years. In fact, a former head of the, former chairman of the FCC has said, hey, did anybody realize what I was doing when I was chairman? I was trying to screw broadcasting in general and make it so difficult to be a broadcaster that we drive them out of business. He says this. The current chairman doesn't say that as such, but in my opinion is headed that way. You have Chairman Janikowski, who ardently believes that broadband is the future and that there is not enough spectrum for broadband, and that one essential way to make that spectrum available is to get it away from broadcasters. So we have a proposal to create what they're calling incentive auctions. The proposal is for the FCC to get Congress to pass legislation that would permit the FCC to work with the industry, at least initially, so that broadcast licensees could voluntarily agree to relinquish part of their spectrum or all of their spectrum to be auctioned off, with the broadcaster enjoying part of the proceeds. So some of the catches in that are the voluntary and the part of. The chairman has broadly hinted in the past that this would be a voluntary program so long as enough spectrum is made available, and who knows what might happen beyond that. The part of the proceeds, the question is how much goes to the government and how much goes to the broadcaster. So you have a bunch of forces coalescing right now. You have the FCC pushing for more broadband spectrum and needing Congress, and they have a plan, and the plan is to try and get auctions up and running in 5 years. That's what they said last year, so the idea was by 2015. There's likely to be legislation in this Congress looking at permitting the FCC to conduct spectrum auctions and to give licensees who didn't pay for their spectrum originally part of the proceeds. You have the TV manufacturers who have made, and I'm making this number up, over $17.2 billion selling digital TV sets. They now want to sell broadband devices. So the same CES guys who were pushing very hard for digital TV, now that the TV sets are sold and the sales are down and 3D's not taking off, are saying, why don't you take that spectrum away from TV and put it over here and we'll sell broadband devices, some of which it looks like would in effect be used to bring TV programs to people, but without being broadcast. If the commission were to proceed with this plan, it would have to repack the spectrum that was just repacked for digital. How could you make the frequencies available? What you need to do, you would need frequency space that's in a certain area of the band. It couldn't be part of channel 12 here and part of channel 43 there. What they're looking for is UHF band, because that works better for broadband. So they're going to want to push all the broadcasters they can down into the high Vs, the very channels where many broadcasters who ended up with high V digital stations have had tremendous coverage problems. After repacking and devaluing part of the spectrum, there would then be an auction under this plan. The incentive would be turn in all or part of your spectrum and you'll get part of the money. So this is the force coalescing with this, in my view, is pretty clearly CPB saying we want people to consolidate operations. We want to compact the public television system. That ties in directly with the FCC's thought. we want to recapture spectrum. So what would a licensee get out of this? Well, there's a formula. The FCC economists put out a paper last year, and there's a formula buried in a footnote with the most extraordinary premise. The premise is, we'll look at what the value of the spectrum is in a particular area. We can see what past spectrum auctions have yielded on what they call a megahertz pop basis. They look at how many megahertz somebody's getting control of, what the population is in the area. You multiply those two and you see, so if you have a metro with 2 million people and you're talking about a 6 megahertz television channel and you're talking about somebody giving up 3 megahertz of the 6 megahertz, well, you have 3 megahertz times the 2 million, you'd have, 2 million people and 3 megahertz, so 6 million megahertz pops. Well, last time we held a spectrum auction in a comparable part of the band that wasn't used in broadcasting, a megahertz pop was worth whatever, $1.07 or 73 cents or whatever. We'll multiply it out. Here's what it might be worth. Then here's where the little legerdemain comes in. They say, but right now broadcasters are only reaching perhaps 85%, are reaching perhaps 85% of their audience through multi-channel video distributors, cable systems and DBS. And maybe they're reaching 15% over the air. So what we would do is we give them 15% of the money that comes in, forgetting that in some areas the over-the-air reception is much greater, forgetting that you're using over-the-air to reach cable head ends as well as DBS head ends. So that's how that is developing. So now what we have, and I need to shuffle the paper a minute to find, here we are. So you have a merger pending right now, not styled as a merger, but in effect it is, where Comcast would be taking over NBC Universal. A lot of reporting about it. I would say there's an excellent chance that merger will be approved with a lot of conditions within the next week or so. It's been the subject of tremendous lobbying at the FCC. So what the FCC has done on major mergers over the years, and each incoming chairman says, I'm not going to do it that way, and each chairman does. What they do is they'll use the occasion of having a major merger in front of them in two ways. Number one, to gather information they wouldn't normally be able to get about an industry by requiring an incredible amount of information from the proposed merging parties. And number two, by using their control over whether or not the parties can merge to extract conditions of a type that they would like to impose on an industry-wide basis, but either it's doubtful they have the authority to impose it, or politically it would be very difficult to do. But they have parties in front of them who desperately want something and are willing to agree to various conditions to get it. I want to highlight just one of the conditions here because it's an interesting one. Comcast has, quote, voluntarily, close quote, proffered a condition to the commission and said, we would willingly take a non-contested grant that includes a condition with respect to public broadcasting and spectrum. We understand that your national broadband plan has ideas for expanding wireless broadband in part by creating opportunities for broadcasters to voluntarily relinquish some or all of their spectrum and share in the proceeds from incentive auctions should Congress authorize this. To support these efforts, Comcast will provide a period of continued carriage on its cable systems for non-commercial educational TV broadcast stations that relinquish their broadcast spectrum as part of the Commission's efforts. So this proposal, worked out in negotiations with the FCC staff, says that public broadcast stations in business as of December 31st, 2010, who relinquish their broadcast spectrum as part of the broadband reallocation, will get this treatment by Comcast. If the station was carried on a Comcast cable system as of the date, December 31st, 2010, pursuant to must carry, they say, we'll keep carrying their programming even if they're no longer a broadcast station. So this is contemplating stations becoming program distributors without antennas. And they say for stations that we are carrying under the industry agreement, the APS, PBS NCTA agreement that was reached in 2005, for you enjoy something commercial stations don't have, which is carriage, with some limitations, but carriage of your digital streams. They say for stations that are enjoying carriage under those agreements will continue to carry their programming too, even if there's not a transmitter. But, number one, they say, but we won't carry that programming if it's duplicative. Right now they have to carry duplicative programming up to a certain extent. And number two, the kicker at the end of the whole thing is this commitment does not extend the term of any existing agreement nor require any Comcast cable system to carry any station or programming stream not already carried December 31st, 2010, not obligated to carry pursuant to the industry agreement. Last sentence, this commitment will expire December 31st, 2017, or upon the FCC's promulgation of rules of general applicability regarding the subject. Well, I can tell you, rules of general, must carry has been heavily litigated with respect to constitutionality for 35, 40 years now. If the FCC were to pass a rule that says former broadcasters' program streams have to be carried on cable, that would be a battle royal in the Supreme Court eventually. So you're looking at a possible deal here with the Commission. Will keep public stations in business if they give up their antennas till the end of 2017. It ain't that far away. You're talking about 6 years, 7 years. For an institution, that's nothing. Even for most of you, that's nothing. So that's, now, will this happen? I don't know. Yesterday, Chairman Janikowski gave a talk at the Brookings Institution in Washington and said, I don't know that I can get this through Congress. Looks to me like we have a tough road. Well, the chairman has a problem with Congress right now that the House has turned Republican, because his big push in broadband had been net neutrality, whole other big topic. And the Commission, after being told by the courts that it couldn't impose network neutrality regulations on broadband providers, then said what we're going to do is reclassify broadband providers, treat them like common carriers under a different part of the communication statute. That wasn't popular with Congress. They backed off at the last minute and did another variation and said, well, we're just going to have this narrow, relatively narrow net neutrality regulation, and here's our rationale under yet another section of the Act, and that's going to be litigated and maybe going to be set aside by the Congress, where a bipartisan majority had already told the Commission not to do this. So Janikowski's star has fallen a little bit at Congress. These things are played in funny ways. I don't know where it's headed. This could have been an announcement by Janikowski yesterday if the signal, I don't know where I'm going, I need my net neutrality broadband people to rally behind me. It could have been a moment of confession. I really have a problem. I don't know. Congressman Upton, who was in charge of a pertinent committee here, then issued a statement later yesterday saying, I don't know why he's worried about this. We're going to put this through. You have another congressman said he better be worried about this. So this is the next big fight as to whether the net neutrality fight is going to spill over into the incentive auction battle, whether or not the Commission will get the authority to hold incentive auctions. If they get authority, can they repack the spectrum? Can they really do something within 5 years? Are there licensees who want to auction off? I can tell you in the commercial world, NAB is fighting the concept of incentive auctions, but some of its members, including particularly licensees in smaller markets, are saying, gee, you know, these are guys with, they have only one mission, which is to make money. They don't have to worry about your stuff.